would you please check your ideas and opinions at the door, first of all? All your philosophical and religious views, all your logic, because I say check it at the door advisedly because you can pick it up again when you go out if you feel unsafe without it.
I've just come back from Los Angeles. I was down there to meet with a group of rather important people, people in the movie industry, scientists and so on, who were considering calling a congress of the best minds in the world to meet in Los Angeles in the near future to be a kind of planetary alarm conference. They wanted scientists and statesmen, religious leaders, and to do something to impress upon the world through all the media that
in order to get the principle of a network across, I have to convey to you an idea which is extremely simple, but which is difficult to grasp only because we're not used to it. We are used to thinking as Westerners, as having a certain kind of language, and therefore a certain kind of logic that goes with it. We're used to thinking of the world in terms of the game of billiards. In other words, we are still thinking about our psychology, our bodies, and their relationship to the outside world in terms of what would scientifically be called Newtonian mechanics. And Newtonian mechanics has a very long history because it goes back to some of the atomic theories of people like Democritus, who were among the great pre-Socratic philosophers of ancient Greece. And so we may as well begin with a little bit about the history of the idea of an atom, because this has always fascinated people. What is the world fundamentally? What is all this?
Do you have any idea how small molecules are?
So people have always tended to consider atoms as balls, especially atoms of liquid. There was a notion, you see, that the atoms of the element of earth were cubes, because cubes all sit together rather firmly. Liquid, which when you put up goes bloop, that was balls. And so when we get down to that bit beyond which there is no bitter, that is to say it can't be chopped any further, it is called in Greek atomos, which means the first letter a means non, tomos, cuttable. And so the word atom means that smallest particle of the world which can't be cut into any smaller particle. That's the original idea of atomism.
Molecules, I mean, think about it. Our understanding of the existence of atoms did not even come into age until the 20th century. Atoms were still a hypothesis, all right, that there'd be this sort of smallest unit of a material called the atom. By the way, the word atom from the Greek means indivisible. So they imagined that there was some indivisible minimal part of a thing. But of course, we bust atoms all the time. So no, they're not indivisible, but we kept the term atom to describe the electrons, protons, neutrons, the classical particles you learn about in high school chemistry and maybe physics. So molecules are, I could give an example, okay? And this is my favorite example of them all. So ask you, think about how much water there is in the world, in all the oceans.
Okay.
And if you go in the middle of the ocean, it's miles deep. Okay? The Titanic was like 3.5 miles, I forgot the exact number, multiple miles below Earth's surface. Okay? That's a lot of water. And what is the water molecule? H2O, okay? So 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen, H2O.
So then, it went further than that to the notion that the world was built of atoms in the same sort of way that a house could be built of bricks or stones. The world is seen, therefore, as a composite of fundamental particles. Then what remained to be discovered was the laws governing the relationship between these particles. And so naturally one thought of them as little balls. Why balls? Because balls are hard to cut. If you take a ball bearing and hit at it with a sword, it's liable to jump right off to one side. A cube will submit to being cut, but a ball is very difficult to get at. A very strong form of nature. But they had some ideas. But fundamentally, what has influenced Western thought, and still influences Western thought, is the idea of an atom as some sort of fundamental little planetary system. And so these things come into relationship with each other, and they bang each other around, as in the game of billiards. And so if we are to understand the world profoundly, we have to find out what are the laws governing the relationship of the atoms.
Well, this is the difference between believing something and using the methods and tools of science to establish what is objectively true. And what is objectively true is something that is true outside of your belief system. That's what science is. It all could be, how did life get here? How did the Earth get here? How did the sun, moon, solar system get here? How did the galaxy get here? How did the universe get here? And so all of our evidence points to a pretty fun beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. We got a term for it, the Big Bang. So the problem of origins is a very different kind of investigation from just describing just the existence of a thing. And there are many cups here, and so we can say, oh, this came out of a factory. But what made the factory? Well, people made the factory. Then what made the people? You keep going back, and then you have the sort of the origins question, because typically there's only one origin of anything, so you can't compare it.
And even if you did say you knew, I would say you didn't know.
You must understand, first of all, a principle about what are called laws of nature. We inherit the idea of laws of nature from our theology. And our theology that we've grown up with is in certain ways peculiarly different from the theologies of Oriental peoples. Jewish theology and Christian theology, which have entered very profoundly into the common sense of the average person, have an image of the world which is quite basically political, and we'll go further than that and say it's monarchical. Now, these are things that if you're brought up in that environment, you take for granted. That seems to be the natural attitude to God. But imagine someone coming in from a culture where God is not conceived in the image of kingship. How strange he would find this behavior.
If you knew nothing about science, and you read, say, the Bible, the Old Testament, which in Genesis is an account of nature. That's what that is. And I said to you, give me your description of the natural world based only on this. You would say the world was created in 6 days, and that stars are just little points of light, much lesser than the sun. And in fact, they can fall out of the sky, right? Because that's what happens during the Revelation. One of the signs that the second coming is that the stars will fall out of the sky and land on Earth. To even write that means you don't know what those things are. You have no concept of what the actual universe is. So everybody who tried to make proclamations about the physical universe based on Bible passages got the wrong answer. So what happened was, when science discovers things, and you want to stay religious, or you want to continue to believe that the Bible is unerring, what you would do is, you would say, well, let me go back to the Bible and reinterpret it. Then you'd say things like, oh, they didn't really mean that literally, they meant that figuratively. So this whole sort of reinterpretation of how figurative the poetic passages of the Bible are, came after science showed that this is not how things unfolded. And so the educated religious people are perfectly fine with that. It's the fundamentalists who want to say that the Bible is the literal truth of God, that and want to see the Bible as a science textbook, who are knocking on the science doors of the schools trying to put that content in the science. Enlightened religious people are not behaving that way. They're saying, yes, science is cool, we're good with that, and use the Bible to get your spiritual enlightenment and your emotional fulfillment.
You create the world by the word. And this is something that we're not very conscious of. It's the way you think that determines your basic reactions to what happens. In the words of Shakespeare, there is nothing either good or ill, but thinking makes it so. Thinking is talking to yourself inside your head. And we, through this, build up all sorts of weird notions. And people don't readily understand that.